we switched up the schedules and had to make a couple arrangements. Some folks had to get out here earlier, so appreciate everybody's patience. So I'm going to be a little less technical than Bob and Cal. I wanted to think about a little bit about, what does it mean to be a data professional in the AI age. And, but just by way of introduction, I was a computer scientist originally. I got a PhD in linguistics from Harvard. I was interested in the computational system and the human mind. It was about 20 years too early for the current AI boom, so I became a data guy, right? So worked data analytics, business intelligence, finance, ERP, you name it. I was the director of data and AI for a consulting company for about 5 years. Very focused on Fabric, right? And the precursors to Fabric, like Synapse, and some of the things Cal was talking about, the precursors to Fabric. So, cool. So, a little bit of a hot take, but not too hot, right? the reality check. The thing I wanted you guys to think about, right, is your role may well be changing, whether you're ready for it or not. Especially for some of the newer people coming into the field, you really want to consider what's going on with AI. It's profoundly changing the things we can do to automate, right? So with generative AI, we can use voice and text interfaces. We can get things done. The more straightforward and technical something is, in some ways, the easier it is for the generative AI to handle it. So for example, it's very easy to train a model at this point to produce SQL statements. Just for example, right? So you give it the schema of your database, you can iterate over that with some evaluations and very quickly hone in to basic SQL, right? So those are really solved problems at this point. So there's all kinds of things that are being automated. There's the other thing I was going to mention, right, is that anyone can now run their own Fabric instance, right? So all you have to do is set up an Azure subscription. You do it with no support, because you don't want to pay the $1,000 a month for Microsoft support. Again, I'm not a Microsoft person, although I do love the technology, right? So you set up your own subscription, don't refuse support, and then you can set up you set up a resource inside of your Azure subscription that's an F2, right? And that's the one other people mentioned earlier. It's about roughly $300 a month, but you don't have to leave it turned on, right? So you can turn it on for 2 hours, for example, play with something, turn it off, and you maybe have spent 85 cents. Do that once a week, and you can get very efficient at some of these things without having to spend a lot of money, right? Like even I don't leave my Fabric instance turned on, right? I don't want to pay $300 a month. So the question is, what's this new role look like, right? And I guess I'm going on record saying something like an AI agent orchestrator or an AI data translator, right? So the role, the end game role, I think, is to get yourself in a position where you're able to take the data assets that you have in your company, in your organization, make them more AI ready, so that you can then feed the system and go forward. So this is what I call the 3 keys to AI success, but it's really more about understanding what's going on, right? One is practice. You really do have to practice this. So Toby Luca, the CEO of Spotify, came out with this long memo and told everybody in his company they had to learn AI. Well, interesting quotes in the beginning of the memo was, the one thing we've learned about AI is it's so different from everything else, you really have to practice that. This is coming from, the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar startup, right? So that's one, you really do have to practice it. And on top of that, the technology is changing. I mean, it's changing weekly, right? We're seeing new models come out. We're seeing new features come out, and Microsoft Fabric's getting new features every week. It's going to continue to grow and change. So if you sat down, 3 months ago, tried a query in Microsoft Copilot and didn't come up with any interesting results, it's understandable, but you need to try again, right? You need to keep trying every few months. See what can happen, see what you can get away with, because it's going to continue to change, it's going to continue to improve. The second kind of big picture thing is like any process, any automation that you can think about is going to fit somewhere along the spectrum of all AI or all human, right? So we're not super interested in all human here at this point. All AI, well, that's just automation, right? So we just go ahead and set something up to happen every morning at 6 a.m. The much more interesting cases are those where it's somewhere in the middle, right? So the AI can do some work, can help expedite some of that tedious drudgery, right? But there still needs to be some human judgment. That's going to be the majority of the business cases that are going to be interesting enough to spend time on, interesting enough to develop a technical solution for. And so where we need to land as professionals is we have the human judgment. We're ready with that judgment and creativity. We're also very skilled with the AI. We can manipulate the AI to get it to do the drudgery parts and kind of move on from there. Any questions while we're philosophizing here? Sorry. Okay, so a couple things. If you do set up your own, tenant, you would have to enable Copilot. These are just some basic things. Some of the things you can do, right, is you can endorse or certify models. You can actually mark data sets as AI prepped. You can create answers, verified answers for specific questions. And of course, you can monitor things. I was just going to bring up very quickly my admin portal, right? So this is the admin portal in Fabric. These are the key features here. So users can use Copilot. Users can access standalone cross-item Copilot experiences. And what's interesting, so I gave a kind of a version of this talk back at the beginning of June in Houston, and this feature was not there yet, right? You can actually enable this feature, the only show AI prepped items in your standalone Copilot. If you enable that feature, then your users would only see those models that you had prepared and certified as AI ready, right? So you can see Microsoft's continuing to add functionality, features, and settings that are going to support this kind of vision where the AI is hitting that data that you've made ready. Okay, let's flip back to. So I always make it a point to leave at least one AI-generated image that has a misspelling or other issue. So here's the one for this presentation. almost got it right. Interconnected is very close. If you're wondering, these are actually slides generated by Gamma. Although Microsoft Copilot is coming along and getting better, Gamma is still the best in the business. So, talk a little bit about essential prompting skills. For this case, we're going to talk a little bit about how to, how to build your semantic models and set them up for success with AI, and then talk a little bit about positioning and where you want to go in terms of your action plan. So some of this is basically straightforward, right? And if you guys have been doing a lot of AI, this is going to be repetitive, but just bear with me for a minute. A bad prompt is one that's too simple and it's not giving enough context, right? If you look at any kind of successful AI application, right? What it does is it takes that question and it goes out and pulls all kinds of extra data, the context that's needed, right? And it stuffs that into the prompt along with any other essential information, either came from a database or came from a vector search or what have you. It puts all that information in. We don't necessarily have that here, right? So we have to give it as much information, as much context, and when we ask it to give us an answer. And this is just a little, think about the context, add time frames, ask it to verify things, name the measures, specific things that you want to pull out, and ask it for recommendations, ask it for additional actions. That combined with the work you would do on the model side to make sure that the semantic model is clean and has good descriptions and so forth, will hopefully give the Copilot enough context and information to do a good job of answering the question. So this just a couple of points here, right? Just when we're asking for segments, right? We want to be very specific. Ask it for the things that you want it to come back with. Ask it for multiple dimensions. Ask it for insights. So when we started all this, we said you have to do this. You have to practice, right? And so all I'm doing here is giving you some dimensions upon which you might want to practice, right? Taking your data set and iterating over that. So my original demo was all in, was using the worldwide importers database. That was no longer available, so I had to pull the taxi database, sample database. So this is what you get out of the box if you pull up a sample data warehouse in Fabric, right? You get tables like trip, medallion, Hackney license, and column ideas like medallion ID, total amount. And if you give it a crummy, underspecified prompt, it's going to give you a poor answer. One of the examples I gave it actually gave me, I said, what was the revenue growth? It gave the same revenue, the total revenue, for each year. So clearly not enough information was provided. The key skill here is to design data that the AI can understand. By AI, a language model, right? Something that may have some experience and it may have some exposure to things like taxi trips. So we're going to write out, more illustrative table names like taxi trips completed, total revenue, USD, trip distance, miles, trip duration, seconds, payment type. And then when you hit it with an appropriate prompt, it's going to be better able to come back with with a more detailed response. So one of the things, that's just an aside, but one of the things I thought about building out a specific demo for this. This is actually going to change, right? Sometime in the next few weeks, probably, right? The point I want to keep hammering home is repetition, right? We need to practice, we need to try things. You need to look at your data and the schemas that you've got and see how well they work. So again, descriptive names. Anywhere we can add a description, for example, in a semantic model, you've got the column name and a description. You want to fill those out, right? You want to have consistent conventions. You want to make sure you capture anything about the business context, right? There's a huge difference between revenue in different companies in different situations. Revenue for a engineering construction company has to be spread out over the life of a project, whereas revenue if a retail company is going to be point in time. There's huge differences between the kinds of things you talk about as revenue in real organizations. So the more you capture those details in the descriptions and even in the names, if possible, then the better off you are. We can also use the descriptions and synonyms within Power BI, the model itself. And verified answers, this is something I haven't worked with a lot, but it does seem to be a key feature that has been pretty new. So just continuing along, some of the anti-patterns we want to avoid, duplicating measures and having lots of measures that are very, very similar, named, but they're not. They're dissimilar in function, so you really have to tease out the differences in the descriptions or in the the comments you append. Where it's revenue open paren USD close D, the close paren. Definitely need the descriptions. You don't want superfluous sources, right? So at this point in time, I think we're still better off if we're having 1 or 2 or 3 good sources, certainly less than 5 or so. And the quality, in order to keep improving, you really have to have some kind of feedback and ability to monitor what's going on and keep up with that. And that's key with, this is kind of the situation with all AI systems. So we've already seen several examples of fabric data agents, right? So again, scope them as carefully as you can to the actual key points of data. Add instructions, give examples. One of the key things we've seen with larger, like RAG apps, AI applications, is a lot of times if you run through a series, say, of 100 examples, you're going to end up with 5 or 10 or 15 that are not good. You're not happy with the answers. And so many times you can take one of those sets of input and the output you want, and you code that into the prompt as a one-shot example, right? So that's what we're talking about with seed, with examples. The great thing about Fabric is, of course, security is enforced. That's all the good stuff that Cal and Bob were talking about. So that's pretty straightforward to handle. So here's the idea, right? If you haven't been doing this, and I don't care if it's a week, you're taking it over 3 weeks or 3 days or what have you, look at your current models, find a good model that is actually in heavy usage, right, that people are looking at, and try to transform that into an AI-ready design, and then test the chat with that. Go in, open up the Copilot experience in Fabric, and work with it, iterate over it until you understand what the prompts need to look like to be able to get the right answers, and then you can create a data agent using your learnings from that prompt. So a couple other thoughts, right? So add this to your LinkedIn profile, right? AI-ready data architecture. Put it on your resume. Once you've obviously tried this and gotten quite a little bit adept at it, right? Talk about designing semantic models for conversational analytics, and offer to lead projects or initiatives inside your own organization. So what I did was, I put together some of this material in what I call a playbook. Right, so this is a GitHub repo that I'm not projecting, so hold on. Before I throw that up, engage with your local communities. We saw a lot of links for that earlier. Connect with me. Be happy to talk to anybody who has any questions or thoughts. And let me escape the projection. Right? So this is just a little GitHub that I've started, right? Talked a little bit about the prereqs, the initial setup, what you'd want to do to clone this GitHub repo, different communities and forums, and if we go into look at examples, for example, model transformations, a naming convention guide, lots of examples, like here are some tables where we've added additional context to the name. Again, you would also add descriptions and everything else. And I think we're about at time. Is that correct? Yeah, okay. So, oh, my mouse is stuck. I guess we're at time. So this is an open GitHub repo. If you want to take a look at it, you want to take a crack at it, you want to change something, feel free to contribute. We can try to maintain it if there's enough interest, and kind of keep it going moving forward. Again, I think we're going to see a lot of change over time, so you don't have to learn everything, right? To be a data professional, you don't have to learn lots of linear algebra. It's just not necessary. But you do have to play with the tools that are being offered to you through Microsoft Fabric and through Copilot, and make sure that you're fully functional with all those tool sets. So that's basically what I have. If anybody have any questions? Thoughts? Yes, sir.
On the data agent slide, you said limit the sources kind of less than or equal to 5. But the kind of spirit of Fabric is that it gets lots of data sources, all available under one hood.
Right.
So I guess how do you balance?
But see, for example, if you saw Cal's example, you could take 8 or 10 different sources, roll them up into a single lake house, and so you're really combining, doing a lot of that work. You're giving so much context that's a case where you're not being penalized, I would think, right? It's when you have lots of multiple data sources that appear disconnected at first glance, that's just going to take more work for the Copilot essentially, right, of the data agent to try to figure out what it is you're talking about. And it's especially painful if like several of these different data sources are using some of the same words like revenue, etc., right? But it can't tell the difference between what they are. Yes, sir.
Could you flash your last slide on where your playbook is located?
Yeah, well, okay, so it is right here, but I don't know if you can see that. Sorry. Cool, so I'll be around. If anybody has a question or just wants to chat, then I'm happy to stick around.
Thank you.